Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Claire Burke, and I'm a Career Services Associate with Employment Boost. And today we're going to be going over some tips and best practices on how to stand out as a top candidate in these uncertain times. So I'll give it just a couple of moments for everybody to get settled in. If new people are going to be filtering in, that's great as well. And we'll get started in just a minute here. All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you who are new here, my name is Claire Burke. I am a Career Services Associate here with Employment Boost. And as the title mentions, today we will be going over how to stand out in today's job market. And as many of you know, the job market right now is more uncertain than it has been in quite some time. So it's more important now than ever to make sure that you have the best resources and the best strategy in place to make yourself stand out in that highly saturated candidate pool. So before we start diving into the strategy, the bulk of the information here, I'd just like to take a moment to go over who we are, what we do, and where this information is coming from. So here at Employment Boost, we are an expert full services outplacement, career coaching, and resume writing firm. We are headquartered in Michigan with offices across a lot of major metropolitan areas in the US, including Chicago, Cleveland, Denver, and New York City. And our firm's B2B and B2C services are built on over a decade of industry-leading career services expertise. We have 5-star reviews across multiple review platforms, SHRM, Google, Yelp being a few notable ones there. So that's a little bit about our company. And as Employment Boost, we are a subsidiary of Heavy Hitter Holdings. And you can see there are a lot of different brands here under that umbrella, many of which are recruiting firms, executive search firms. So as a member of Heavy Hitter Holdings, we're really able to leverage those resources and leverage those insights from those different companies, from these recruiters, these executive search firms, and to kind of warp all of that and tie that all together to inform our strategy for the resume. So all of our strategies, everything that we'll be going over today, is informed by these real-world hiring practices, as demonstrated by recruiters and by these market researchers. So it's a great resource that we have here, and again, a lot of what we'll be going over today is informed by that. So let's go over our team. Our team here at Employment Boost is comprised of certified professional resume writers, such as myself, as well as career coaches, and they have a wealth of knowledge in various topics, interviewing, negotiations, relocations, things of that nature. Our career coaches are experts in, and we're able to really work with them, again, to make sure that we are staying up to date with the best practices that are constantly evolving in today's job market, right? And then, like I mentioned, really leaning on those executive recruiters and market researchers to make sure that our insights are cutting edge, real world, and applicable for the job search. So again, working together as a team, combining all of these strengths and resources to present a holistic view of resume writing, of career services, and how to stand out in today's times. So now that we've covered who we are exactly and what we do, let's talk about our position. So based on all of our experience in hiring, HR, and recruiting, we have seen time and time again that the best candidates often have the best resumes. And that is for a multitude of reasons. One of the most important being that first impressions are everything, especially in the job search. Think now about how many candidates are out there looking for roles. Each position that you apply to might have hundreds, if not thousands, of other candidates, all very qualified people going for the same position. So it's important that you are standing out and that you are reflecting yourself in the best way that you can for that initial impression. And your resume is a great place to do this. Making sure that you're investing time and energy into your resume is crucial. Your resume essentially is a piece of marketing collateral, and you are the product that is being marketed. So making sure that you are putting that resume together, that you are taking the time to do your research, to strategize, and make sure that everything is in the best shape it can be is crucial. It's not just important to have a great resume, though. The great resume is the first step. It is incredibly important. And it's also incredibly important to be strategic about how you use your resume. So the best candidates that we see not only put this extra time into cultivating and crafting their resume, they take the extra time to put a strategy in place for their search. Not just about what to put on the resume, but how to use the resume, where and when to apply, how often to apply. All of these factors make a difference. And if you keep these in mind and if you formulate a strategy based on what we'll be discussing throughout, your chances will increase and you will see the results. So making sure that you're being strategic, that you're putting the time into your resume, you will see a difference, and it's incredibly important. It's also important to understand the game of the job search and how the different audiences and the different factors play into that game. Things like applicant tracking systems, basic human psychology and bias, and navigating technology are becoming more and more important. So the strategy should focus on all of these different aspects of your audience, of how the resume is used, and by being able to understand that and navigate that, you will be able to feel much more confident about the resume that you are putting out and about the results that you will be seeing from that resume. So again, be strategic about what you put on the resume, how you create it, and also how you use it. So now that we've gone over our introduction, let's touch on the agenda for today. We'll start out by going over resume writing as a whole and what the purpose of a resume is, how resumes are used. Once we've understood that, we'll move forward into the actual content of the resume. Things like keywords is something that is becoming more and more important, and I'm sure many of you have heard about the importance of keywords. We'll go into what these keywords actually are, how they work, and how you can best use them to pursue your goals. We'll also be going over how to best leverage your own experience, your accomplishments, the things that you are proud of, in a way that demonstrates your candidacy, the impact that you can make on an organization. So being able to create the content of your resume in alignment with all of these different factors that go into how it is reviewed, how it is judged, and how it is ultimately moved forward or thrown out. Next, we'll move on to formatting and style. And formatting and style is something that we will be talking about a lot today. So formatting is crucial. It's often seen as maybe an afterthought, right? The content of the resume is so important to nail down, but the formatting is just as important. And we'll talk more about why formatting is so crucial and how to format your resume in a way that is effective. Lastly, we'll go over some common mistakes and job search practices. As career services professionals, we are seeing hundreds, if not thousands of resumes every single week. So we do see a lot of these errors. We'll talk about these mistakes and how to avoid them to make sure that you are not making those errors and again, putting your candidacy in jeopardy because of those. And then again, finally, going over some tips, how to strategize and how to move forward with your resume once you have made sure that you've gotten it in the best place it can be. So before we talk about how to write your resume, let's go over the resume as a whole and the purpose of a resume. So the purpose of a resume is to communicate your skills, your accomplishments, and your experience to the company that you are applying to. Again, it is a piece of marketing collateral. You want to make sure that you are showing your accomplishments and skills in a way that makes you seem like the best candidate for this role. And the resume does not need to be all-encompassing. That's a mistake that we do see a lot. The resume is not a manifesto. Rather, it is a curated, select list of your achievements, the relevant strengths, and transferable skills that are going to help you get a role. So we'll be discussing what to include on a resume, what to avoid later on. But just from the very beginning, it's important to note that the resume should not have everything you've ever done. Rather, it is a place to showcase your accomplishments and the most important details in a persuasive manner. From there, the resume gets your foot in the door, and you can further elaborate in the interview itself and contextualize. Your resume is also a very powerful tool when it comes to professional branding. Your resume is not just a place to show these strengths, these accomplishments, these responsibilities, but also a place to showcase your leadership, your work ethic, and who you are as a professional. So the different decisions that you make, whether it be writing choices, formatting choices, those can all play a role in giving the hiring manager an idea of your professionalism, your skill, and who you are. And in some cases, how you will be a fit into the culture of the companies that you are applying to, based on your professional brand. So seeing the resume as this opportunity to have more than one thing comprised within it. It's not just about listing these strengths and accomplishments, it's also about creating a brand that celebrates your achievements and that shows that you will be able to drive growth and change at the organizations that you are applying to. So before you begin writing your resume, it's incredibly important to understand who and what will be reading it. So in order to know how to best formulate your resume, you need to know your audience and who will be the ones making the decision to move you forward in the hiring process or not. So you'll see here supervisors, HR managers, recruiters, and talent acquisition specialists. These are often the types of people that will be reviewing your resume and deciding whether or not, again, to move you forward to the interview process. But you'll notice here on this list, one of these things is not like the other, and that would be the applicant tracking system, or the ATS. While supervisors, HR managers, and recruiters are all people, the applicant tracking system is a digital component to the job search that is just as, if not more, important than these human beings who will be reading your resume. The applicant tracking system is something that is becoming increasingly common and increasingly utilized. So it's really important to understand what it is, how it works, and how it impacts your candidacy. So what is an ATS? An ATS is an electronic database that stores resumes. When you submit your resume to a job posting online, more often than not, it will be going to an applicant tracking system, where it is then housed and parsed through. Hiring managers and recruiters will input key search terms to narrow down the candidate pool. And again, when we're thinking about the number of applicants for each role being in the hundreds, if not the thousands, you can see where the applicant tracking system can come in to improve the efficiency of that process. So when the recruiter inputs their search terms, they're able to narrow down that candidate pool from thousands to a select group, and then they'll review the resumes and make those hiring decisions. So the ATS is almost like the first line of contact for your resume, and understanding how you can navigate the different challenges and benefits of the ATS is important to understanding how you can best put your strategy in place for your job search. So the ATS parses through these resumes for these key terms, which again, we'll go into a little bit more in just a moment. And it weighs the resumes and it changes their visibility based on the frequency of these key terms, the placement of these key terms on the resume, and the font style. The more often a word or keyword is used in your resume, the more visible your resume becomes to that hiring professional. Things like placement also play a role. Words at the top of the resume are going to carry more weight than those that are at the bottom. And bolded font styles, similarly, are valued higher than plain or italicized font styles. So these are all different areas of how things that are not actually related to the keyword itself, the content of the keyword, but more on the placement, the formatting, and style of the keywords. Applicant tracking systems are also used to sort candidates by the more administrative details. Things like location. If you've ever seen a company use a geofiltering service, the applicant tracking system can function for geofiltering. So if a company is only looking for candidates within a certain radius of their location, the applicant tracking system can narrow that down and remove candidates that are outside of those specifications. The ATS can also be used to search for education, certifications, licensure, all of those different qualifications that they are looking for that are likely listed in the job description itself. So it's really important to understand that when you are writing your resume, you are not just writing for people. It is not just a human eye that will be reviewing your resume. It's also a digital eye. And so being able to navigate and balance those two different audiences is going to be crucial. Finally, graphics and images are not the key to success in the applicant tracking system. It can be so tempting to include these things, right? Graphics, images, but actually they can hinder your chances rather than help them. Things like images can skyrocket the file size of your resume and could potentially result in your resume being mismarked as spam and eliminated, again, before a hiring manager can even review it. So knowing how the digital eye, again, parses through these documents, qualifies these documents, and sorts these documents is crucial to making sure that yours gets in the right pile. So now that we've gone over what exactly applicant tracking systems are, let's talk about their use in today's job market. As you can see here, we are seeing a steady increase in Google searches for the term applicant tracking system. And that is a trend that is likely to keep going. Again, you can see the benefits of the ATS, especially on the side of a hiring professional. They're a great way for these recruiters, for these HR managers to manage and maintain their candidates' resumes. So seeing that frequency of use, seeing that 75% of recruiters and hiring professionals have actually said that yes, they do use an applicant tracking system, is really key to understanding how important they are. In a successful job search, you're likely going to be applying to more than just one company. So the chances that one of these companies will be using an ATS is incredibly high. So no matter what, understanding how that plays a role, whether or not the company ultimately uses it or not, you might not know, but chances are they will, and chances are by following these tips, you will put yourself in a better position and again, make yourself stand out from the candidate pool. We also see that as many as 75% of qualified job applicants are actually rejected by the ATS due to reasons that seem completely superfluous, things like formatting, which I touched on a little bit about at the beginning, the importance of formatting. And again, we'll go into that a little bit later. But just seeing how something like formatting can be the reason that a perfectly qualified applicant could be completely rejected, it really shines a light on how the ATS plays a role and why understanding the game of navigating the ATS can help you move forward. And then finally, another statistic that we do have here we see is that 8 out of 10 candidates do describe their online job search and online job application process as stressful, which is a completely understandable feeling. I think many, if not all of us, have felt in a similar position. But being able to have that confidence, to know how the ATS works and to know how to put a strategy in place to work with the ATS can help decrease some of that stress, right? Knowing that you have a plan in place and that you are going to see results with that perseverance and with that dedication, you can remove some of that unwanted stress and focus more on the job search. All right, so now that we've gone over the applicant tracking system, we'll start talking about how to develop that plan that is so important. And I just wanted to let you all know we do have a live chat box here, so feel free if any questions come up throughout this presentation to put them in the live chat. We'll do our best to answer them throughout the presentation, and we'll also take some time at the end to do a question and answer session. So feel free to either, again, throughout this presentation, reach out with questions or after. and we'll answer them or point you in the direction of the right resources to get the answer that you are looking for. So the first step to developing a strategy is gathering those relevant keywords. And I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what a keyword is and how it functions in the job search. There is no magical list of keywords for different positions, for different industries. There is no one set of words that are going to be successful all the time. And I think that's something that is seen a lot, right? Is people thinking that maybe there is a certain list that needs to be on there, but it's actually very specific to the job description itself. Rather than thinking of these keywords as something that is maybe role specific or completely industry specific, think of it as key to the job description and what words are going to be key for each position that you apply to. They're going to change every single time. And what you can start to do is looking for as many job descriptions as you can. We have an example here. This person wants an entry-level finance position. So what they should do is go through all of these different job descriptions and look for any trends, look for commonalities, look for words that are used frequently in this type of role. And that can give you a good idea of what these people are looking for. So once you've gone through these job descriptions, again, you'll start to see some trends and you'll start to see these terms come together. We have an example here. This bullet says, build and manage stakeholder relationships. That is something that they are looking for as a responsibility of this role. So something like stakeholder relationships, stakeholder management, stakeholder relationship management. You can see how these different terms might be what the hiring manager will be searching in the applicant tracking system. Another example here, they want somebody who can do extensive analysis, establish root causes. So these little clues can be the make or break. And by going through these job descriptions, again, looking for these trends, looking for these commonalities, you can inform your strategy for putting in those keywords. So keep an eye out from that. Again, take the time to do your research, look at multiple positions, look at what they are looking for and how those differ per company and how those stay the same per company. And that will give you the best idea of what to include on the resume. Jen, that's a great question. So we have a question here for the applicant tracking system. If you've already applied to a role with an incorrectly formatted resume, should you withdraw those and reapply or leave as is? And so that's a great question. With the roles and with the applicant tracking system, if you've already submitted your resume, you shouldn't necessarily have to withdraw those. That might not be something that's possible, but you can submit another application with a correctly formatted resume. So even if you've already applied to a role, you can still make those changes and submit the new resume to that role. And then moving forward, again, just making sure that you're looking at that formatting, and formatting is something that we'll discuss extensively a little bit later on. So please let me know if any of you have any questions about formatting once we do start covering those, and we'll discuss the best ways to format your resume. All right, so now let's start talking about the content of the resume itself. So we know that the applicant tracking system plays a huge role here. And we know that we need to find those keywords. And we know that they need to go in the resume, right? But how do we build that content? How do we structure the resume? And how do we incorporate these details that are so crucial? We'll start out with, as promised, formatting. And again, formatting will be a very consistent theme here that you'll see. Your resume should be as visually efficient as possible. And so you can see our example here. What visually efficient means essentially boils down to making sure that you have enough white space, enough text, that everything is cleanly labeled. As you can see in this example, professional experience and accomplishments clearly labeled, education, certifications. It's easy to read and easy to skim. And recruiters only take about an average of 10 seconds to review a resume before deciding whether or not to move a candidate forward. So making sure that your resume is, again, easy to read, clearly labeled, and clean is incredibly important. If you have 5 years of experience or less, you can usually stick to a one-page resume with approximately 400 words. So typically with entry-level candidates, again, around 5 years tends to be the cutoff. Your mileage may vary, right? It depends on each person, the amount of roles that you've had, your experience, and your goals. But try to stick to 1 to 2 pages. We don't recommend exceeding 2 pages for the resume, and that is very important. So there are some exceptions to that rule. CVs and federal resumes, for example, tend to extend beyond that 2-page limit. But for a standard resume, which is what most people are going to be creating and using, keep it to 2 pages maximum. You also want to avoid colors, pictures, text boxes, tables, or graphics. And so again, the applicant tracking system comes into play here, right? We mentioned that file size going up can result in your resume being eliminated, and these text boxes and tables can also hinder the ATS's ability to parse through your resume to find those search terms that are so important. So even if you have those search terms, you did your research, I've got these terms, I know what they're looking for, and they're on my resume. If your resume isn't formatted properly, it might not matter in the end. So really important, again, to stay away from any of that funky formatting. And then also the human bias aspect of that as well, right? Let's say that you love orange, you made your header on your resume orange. Let's say that the recruiter reading your resume hates orange. Consciously or not, this could impact how they view your candidacy. So again, the human psychology aspect of the job search, making sure that you're avoiding any chance of bias that you can. And we have a great question from Anne Marie. What if the jobs you're looking for are of the visual arts and graphic design nature, not a metrics and numbers focused job? That's a great question. Something that we see often with professionals in visual arts, graphic design, those more creative and artistic roles, is that candidates will often have 2 resumes. One resume that fits with these principles for online submissions, making sure that the formatting is clean, no graphics, no arts, and then a designed resume where the person will be able to show more of their creative skills, incorporate those different images, colors, again, visuals, graphics. So for that, we would recommend having 2 different versions of the resume. One that you know will work in the applicant tracking system, and one that showcases your skills that are related to the role, right? Graphics design. So that's a great tip there. And if any of you have questions about art, formatting, images on the resume, again, feel free to shout them out and we'll be sure to answer and explain further if you have additional questions about that. So let's talk about the summary. The summary is going to be at the very top of your resume, and it is going to be the first thing that a hiring manager sees on the document. And as we said earlier, hiring managers only take an average of about 10 seconds to review a resume. So getting that summary right at the top of the page is crucial. Use the summary as a place to go over the broad strokes of your experience, your overall skills, your biggest strengths, the impact that you are able to drive. Focus on that. Focus on keyword optimization, right? We mentioned earlier that the applicant tracking system values keywords that are closer to the top of the resume than those that are at the bottom. And because the summary is right at the top, this is an excellent place to blend in those keywords that you found during your research. So use this space wisely, be strategic about placement of these key terms, and use the summary to your advantage. And again, you can also blend in more about your personality. Use this as an opportunity, again, to show your work ethic, your leadership style. What are you most proud of? What are the skills that you think not everybody has that make you stand out? Use the summary as a place to showcase that, as well as those keywords and, again, those broader strengths. That's a great question, Dave. So we have a question, is there a way to test your resume so you know the ATS can index it properly? That is a great question. And so the answer to that is a little bit more difficult. There is no one type of ATS. There are a lot of different brands. So one that's very common you'll see is Bullhorn. Is a very popular ATS that is in use a lot right now, but there are other different types, other different systems. So it's hard to do that kind of test. But basically, making sure that you're keeping the formatting clean, again, avoiding images. If everything is looking good there, you should be all right, and there shouldn't be any issues with the ATS properly indexing your resume if you stick, again, to the professional, clean layout, avoiding graphics, avoiding images, and avoiding anything that's going to make your file size too big. So going back to the summary, here we have a couple of examples on how you can use the job title to declare interest in the roles that you are applying for or to show what you currently do. And so the job title here, we see them a little bit bigger, small caps, bolded. We have financial professional and audit professional. So these two imaginary candidates are putting their hats in the ring for roles in finance, roles in auditing, maybe compliance. And so they're showcasing that interest for the role that they're applying to. You can also showcase what you currently do, right? Let's say you're a project manager, you can make your title project manager. Use the job title wisely. And this is also a great place. Let's say you're making a complete pivot. You've never done something in the industry or in that similar type of role before. You can use the job title to, again, declare that interest by saying something like aspiring digital marketing associate, aspiring team leader, something along those lines to, again, really show what you're looking to do and how your goals fit in with what that company is offering with their job opening. So then moving on from the job title itself to go into a couple of more basic tips for the summary. We recommend keeping the summary short and sweet. So using at most 3 to 4 sentences. I would say typically try to stay around 3, go into 4 if you need that extra space, but we want to make sure that, again, we're using the space on the resume efficiently, especially because we only have 1 to 2 pages to go over all of the relevant accomplishments and skills. So use that space wisely, keep that summary concise, while again, still conveying all that you are looking to convey. And focus on that job description, use those skills that they're looking for, use those key terms that you're looking for. And so with all of these different tips in mind with the summary, you'll be able to craft something that not just helps your chances in the ATS with those keywords, but also shows who you are as a candidate, as a professional, and as somebody interested in this job. So now that we've covered the summary, let's get into the content of the resume itself. You want to make sure that you are using bullet points in your resume. And you also want to make sure that each bullet addresses either a responsibility or an accomplishment, with more emphasis on accomplishments. We want to stay away from using too much task-based language or content. Again, we have a limited amount of space. So rather than listing every single thing that you've ever done, every task or assignment that you have to complete, focus on what's relevant to what you are pursuing. Focus on what you are proudest of, those accomplishments. If you have any metrics tied to those accomplishments, which again, is not always going to happen, right? And we have a great, Anne-Marie, you called that out in your question, that not all jobs are metrics focused, right? So making sure that you are blending the things that you are most proud of into the content while eliminating things that aren't going to help your case, right? And try to keep the bullets to either 1 or 2 lines. Once you start getting a feel for the resume speak, you can have a little bit of flexibility, extend that to maybe 3 lines, but again, make sure that the content is easy to read. We want to avoid anything too clunky because again, recruiters and hiring managers don't have all day to look at the resume. So we want to make it easy to skim through and understand. A best practice that I'm sure many of you have seen before is the recommendation to use action verbs to start each bullet. This is a very common resume best practice. It provides energy to the language of your resume. It helps it become more dynamic. It can also help heighten the impact of what the actual content says. So, we have, for example, here, generated lease agreements, verified and analyzed, efficiently completed. These are all action verbs that, again, provide that life, provide that energy. And you can be sure to use those really strong, high impact, high energy terms to, again, bulk up the content. Let's take an example here. Let's say that you created a new system that helped efficiency at your company. A big deal, an accomplishment, right? When you say it like that, created a new system to increase efficiency, let's compare that to something maybe more along the lines of spearheaded the development and implementation of a novel system that increased efficiency and productivity by XYZ. Again, you can just see by making those little changes to the language, again, providing that energy, using the dynamic language, keeps it interesting, keeps it engaging, and helps your accomplishments further stand out. So the language kind of reinforces the content there. All right, so now that we've gone over that, again, touching on quantitative metrics, and again, that is not something that everybody will have, and if you don't have any, that is completely okay. But just if that is something that is relevant in your position, in your industry, try to think back on those and add them, again, if possible. And be a little bit creative if you need to be. Think about, let's say, the amount of customers you served per day. Maybe you're in a role where you're making a lot of phone calls. How many phone calls are you making per day? Thinking about that and thinking about how you can kind of demonstrate the volume of your workload. And this can also show that you're able to manage these workloads, right? It shows a strength to a hiring manager, that you're able to prioritize, you're able to manage tasks and responsibilities. So think about that, again, if you have them, but if it's not relevant, you can go ahead and leave those out. It shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so then moving on to talk about a little bit again of the more administrative details when it comes to the chronology of your resume. Do your best to showcase as smooth and linear of a timeline as possible. So try to avoid any major gaps and listing those gaps on the resume if you can. Sometimes it's inevitable that there are gaps, it happens, but if you can fill those, try to do so. And think about, let's say you had to take some time off of work, maybe to care for a sick loved one. Think about the skills that you were able to demonstrate and develop in that, right? There are skills that we are using in every single activity that we're doing, and being able to talk to a hiring manager and explain, this is why I was out of work for this amount of time, and here is what I learned from that, and here are the skills I used from doing that, whatever it may be, right? Think about that and how you can leverage that in your favor. And then with the months and timelines itself, you don't need to include months on the resume. You can just stick with years. But if you decide you want to include months, make sure to include them for each position. And consistency is something that you will be hearing me say a lot in the next 20 minutes or so, and that is because it is crucial. We are saying it because it is important. We want to make sure that it hits home. Consistency is essential on a resume for lots of reasons. We'll go into it a little bit more in a bit, but make sure, again, whether it be dates, formatting, style, keep it consistent. Another tip for the content itself, again, more on the administrative details side, is including the geography of your past experiences. So adding the location, city, and state abbreviation should be fine. If it's in another country, put wherever that was. This just gives the hiring manager a little bit more of an idea of where you've been in your career and throughout your career. All right, and we have a great question as well. What would be the best way to format several part-time positions that ran simultaneously? Excellent question. So with those, include them. And so what you can typically do, the one that you started first, the part-time role that you started earliest, you can put that below the ones that are the most recent. So I would say, let's say you have two part-time jobs, one you started this January, one you started in May. Put the May one above the January one, put the January one right after. Let me know if that makes sense. We can definitely create a more visible or visual example if that doesn't sound right. But basically, just keep that chronology in mind. You want the oldest experience to be at the bottom of the resume and the newest to be at the top. So just think about how those start dates fit into that timeline. And then you can show with those overlapping timelines that they did, again, run simultaneously. All right, so consistency in formatting. Again, very, very important. You can see here the job title, the company name, the location, and the dates of employment are formatted exactly the same for these two roles. You don't have to format it like this, but whatever you decide to do, however you decide to list the company name, title, again, geographies, years, keep that going throughout, keep it consistent. You want to avoid the possibility of making any errors there and coming across as sloppy or coming across as though you didn't put the time into formatting your resume. It's really important. And then also use bolded and italicized font styles to your advantage, as well as different sizes of font. You can draw the reader's eyes to where you want them to look by the way that you format and style the actual language, company names, etc. And it's also important to keep in mind, right? We have 10 seconds to make sure that the resume is checking all of the boxes. And if there is no diversity in font style, size, it's going to look like a big wall of text, and that's going to be really hard to scan through in an efficient manner. So by mixing up the font size and style, you're helping the readability of the document, which is incredibly crucial. All right, and another great question from Anne Marie. If you have more than 30 years of experience and you can't include all of the jobs, is it okay to leave some of those first few jobs off the resume? Yes, it is absolutely okay to do that, and we actually recommend doing that. So typically around the year 2000 is where you're going to want to cut the resume off. And that's for a couple of reasons, right? We want to avoid any type of bias or ageism. And also, typically speaking, the most 20 years of experience are going to be, most recent 20 years of experience, are going to be way more relevant than things that you've done before that, before the year 2000. So try to keep it around the most recent 20 years. There's a little bit of flexibility there, but try to cut off some of those earlier ones if you can. All right, so moving on to education and formalities. Be strategic about where you decide to place your education, licenses, certification, etc. Education specifically, you need to determine whether or not your education should be at the top of the resume or at the bottom. And a typical rule here, and again, this isn't going to fit every single case, but more often than not, the longer you've been out of school, the less relevant it becomes on the resume. So let's say you graduated 25 years ago, it's a safe bet that you can probably put that education on the bottom. If you have the professional experience, that is more important than the education. Versus, let's say you're an entry-level candidate, it's likely that you'd want to put the education at the top of the resume. So you can really showcase those academic skills, what you learned in school, and demonstrate how that makes you the most qualified candidate, right? So it's a balancing act, understanding the kind of interdependency and the relationship between education and professional experience and what is more important for your goals. And again, it will differ for each person, but generally speaking, the more entry level you are, the more important education is, and vice versa. All right, so once again, be consistent about how you format the end of your resume. You can see in this version, we've left aligned the titles and stacked the various awards, accomplishments, all of those details. You absolutely do not have to do that. You don't have to stack them. You don't have to format it in the way that this example shows, but make sure that however you format it, again, it is consistent throughout. It makes a difference. It makes an important difference, and you want to make sure that you are keeping that consistency throughout the document. All right, and I see we have a comment in the live chat. You're a college student looking for an internship outside of where you live. That is a great thing to think about. When it comes to being from a small city opposed to others who might have experience in bigger cities, that's going to depend on the employer, right? It's going to be different for each person. Typically, for each hiring manager, each company, each organization, what they're looking for. Something that we do recommend, if you are looking to relocate or maybe move to a bigger city, think about the geofilters and think about adding something in your header about planning to relocate to the city that you are looking to apply to, or replacing the zip code and city information in your header to the zip code and city information of that job that you are applying to. That can help you avoid those geo filters. Other than that, when it comes to where you're from, it's impossible to say. Every hiring manager is different, every company is different, whether or not they take that into account, unclear. But by kind of playing with the geography and the header of your resume, you can avoid some geo filters and increase your chances of being seen for a position that might be in a different geography than where you're currently from. All right. So then finally going over the education and the formalities and thinking about any additional information that you'd like to include to bulk up this area of the resume. Again, if that is something that will be helpful for you. And we're about to see two examples here. We have one example that has a much more built out education section. You can see in that top example, yes, we have the degree earned, relevant coursework, various projects. It's built out. It expands more on what was done in school. Whereas the second example, as you can see, doesn't, right? It shows the degree, major, and university. Both of these are great options. It just depends on your needs, where you're at in your career, and what you're looking to do. So again, think about these types of things. Think about awards or scholarships that you've won, organizations that you've been a part of or volunteered with, any technical skills or certifications you've picked up along the way. Think about that. Maybe you had any trainings at work that might be relevant to your goals. Again, just things to think about, things to brainstorm as you build out this section. All right, and I see we have a question from Dave. With COVID and remote working becoming common, are there ways to increase your chances of recruiters looking for candidates in your state? So with that, it's hard to increase your chances of recruiters looking directly for you, but just making sure that when you are applying to roles, you're looking at the locations, looking for any trends that you're seeing. Maybe some areas are hiring more than others, whether it be a town or a city or whatever it may be. But it's hard to increase the chances of recruiters specifically looking for candidates in your state, because a lot of the times, recruiters are looking to fill job orders, right? And so that is dictated by the company that is hiring. So that's hard to do, but something that I would definitely recommend is connect with recruiters on LinkedIn. Connect with recruiters that work in the industry that you're in, look for them, message them, make sure to build that network, right? And that's a great way to kind of get more of an idea of what these recruiters are looking for and their insights into the job search itself. All right, a great question from Dima. Should we include all of the LinkedIn learning certifications on our resume? A great question. Typically with the LinkedIn learning certifications, it could go either way, and it depends on how much experience that you have, how much professional experience, and how much you've used those skills. So maybe you took a couple of LinkedIn learning certifications in something that you want to do in the future. Maybe it was a programming language or something that you haven't done in the past but will be relevant in the job you're pursuing. Then it would be a great place to include that, right? Think about the keywords. Think about what these employers want to see. That doesn't necessarily mean you should include all of them. Again, be strategic. What is going to be the most beneficial? What keywords and what themes do recruiters and hiring professionals want to see on your resume? And then move forward accordingly. And then another question here from Janice on education, noticing that the resume had left off the dates of attendance and graduation. We do recommend leaving those off, especially for individuals who are not entry level, right? People more in the professional sphere or executive. Typically with education, you can leave off the dates unless you're still in school or you have like a projected graduation date. So recommended to leave off the dates of attendance and graduation, just to make sure that, again, we're avoiding any chance of ageism. We don't want any recruiters to be doing a ton of math there, right, to try to figure out your age. So leave those off. That doesn't mean that they won't ask you that in the interview process, but on the resume, it's typically better to do that. All right. And then so finally, a couple more details about the education. Be as specific as possible, again, when it is relevant, especially pertaining to your education. If you have a high GPA, put that on there. I also want to note, if you are somebody who is maybe more entry level, who is looking for a job, and you think maybe including your GPA might hinder you rather than help you, you don't have to put your GPA on the resume. Again, that does not mean that they will not ask you your GPA in the hiring process, but on the resume, it is not mandated that you have to put your GPA on. So be strategic. If you think it'll help you, add it. If you think it might not, leave it off. Similarly, Dean's List, any other academic awards, list everything clearly. Again, consistency in formatting is crucial there. And think about, again, anything else that can bulk up your candidacy and your experience. All right. So then finally, once we've gone over the whole of the resume, top to bottom, we'll go over some additional thoughts as well as the resume as a whole, taking another look at it once we've gone into all of these different components and pieces. All right, and so before we do that, just to answer a few questions, do you have recommendations about font size and spacing? In the adult education section, they usually require APA, but that takes up much more space. Or adult education sector, excuse me. Font size is going to differ. Typically around 10-point font should work well, because again, it's hard. We want to make sure that we're including everything relevant on the resume. Sometimes that takes a little bit of a smaller font size, which is more standard on resumes. I would say with font size, don't go below 9.5. You don't want to go lower than that. Just again, readability is key. So try to stay within 10, 11, 12 for your font size. And spacing, just make sure that, again, you're spacing it in a way that is easy to read, but that the spacing isn't taking up too much space in itself. So that's something that you'll be able to kind of measure and tell as you look at it. If it might help to have a friend scan through it. And that's something that we'll actually talk about a little bit later in getting that second pairs of eyes on it. So feel free to ask someone to skim it for you, just to make sure it's easy to read and that the font size isn't too small. And then another question from Jen, should you leave the college dates in if it explains a gap in work? Yes, that is a great example of adding dates to something like college, for example, to fill in a gap in work. So yes, if you have, let's say you took work off and maybe you pursued a degree or something part-time there, put in those dates so you can fill that, yes. And then a question from Chrissy, do you recommend customizing the resume to each job that you apply to? Or does one resume end up in a larger system beyond that specific employer? Another great question. You should be customizing the resume for every single job you apply to. All of these different companies are going to be using different applicant tracking systems. Some of them might be branded, some of them might be internal. So making sure that you are customizing the resume for each job, using those keywords for each job, and tailoring it each time is going to be really important. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on, but yes. All right, so again, think about what is the most relevant, what is the most important, what do the company require, what do they value? Be sure that you're showing that, presenting yourself as a holistic candidate who can fit the needs of this company and show how your goals align with their goals for the position that you're applying for. All right, so now let's dive into some common resume mistakes. And the first one that we see a lot is stating an objective statement rather than a summary. And objective statements have fallen by the wayside. They used to be a lot more popular, but we do not recommend including an objective statement. And so essentially what an objective statement is doing is stating your objective to work in a certain role. Let's say, for example, pursuing a role as a human resources generalist. That would be a typical objective statement. And that's all well and good, but a summary is going to be so much more powerful, so much more helpful. Again, it includes those opportunities to incorporate keywords, show your professional brand, your skills, your strengths. And it's also important to think your objective is to apply for an HR generalist role, right? If you're applying to an HR generalist role, they already know that you're intending to apply for this role because you did apply for it. So objective statements, redundant, not necessary. Go for a summary to really take full advantage of that space. Another common mistake, including irrelevant information. Again, this resume does not have to be a manifesto about everything you've ever done. It should be a curated select list of your most relevant achievements and accomplishments. And then kind of going into that, describing responsibilities and tasks, kind of like I mentioned earlier. Rather than accomplishments, we want to avoid task-based language, focus again more on the most latest, most greatest, and the things that you are most proud of, where you were able to see an impact. Another common mistake that we see are spelling and grammatical mistakes. We all know it can be easy to make a typo. The resume is not the place to leave that in, so make sure that you are using your spell check, reviewing the resume for any grammatical issues. And again, if you need to tap a friend and say, hey, I've been looking at this resume for too long, it all looks the same to me, can you review this for errors? That can be a great way to, again, get a fresh pair of eyes on it and make sure that you're not missing anything. All right, and then finally, funky formatting we've gone over. It is not helpful both on the human side and on the applicant tracking system side, so save that for personal projects and make sure that the resume is as clean and professional as possible. All right, and I see a question in the chat here from Dima. You're fluent in 3 languages. Should you leverage this in the summary or in the skills section? Another great question. So languages is something that can often be included alongside the education and certification information. You can also include it in the summary by even labeling yourself, trilingual professional, something like that, where you can call on it in the summary and also reinforce it later in the more administrative details. But yeah, that's a great question. If you have any languages that you are fluent or proficient in, think about that. Think about if they're going to be helpful, and then definitely include them if so. All right. So then looking over the sample resume, like I said, we've gone over all of these different bits and pieces from the summary all the way to the bottom, education and volunteerism. So we'll pull up this sample again. We've been looking at this, but this gives you more of a fuller view of what it should look like. And again, your resume does not have to look exactly like this. It does not have to be styled in this way, but keep these things in mind. The visual efficiency, the education, how you're spacing everything, how you're diversifying the font size and style. Keep those in mind to make sure that your resume, again, is in the best possible place it can be. All right, so now that we've gone over the resume, how to write it, who's reading it, the best way to go about creating that content, and again, getting that resume in the best possible position for both the applicant tracking system and the hiring manager, let's talk about some job search best practices. And so something that's really important to note is that the rules for a good job search during a pandemic are not different than the rules for a good job search during normal times. They are the exact same rules. These rules work, but it is more important now than ever. We are seeing all of these candidates, we are seeing layoffs happen, and we are seeing less and less openings, right? Because of the economic fragility as a result of the pandemic. So making sure that you're incorporating these rules, incorporating the best practices that we've discussed here is crucial. And take the time to adjust the resume for each posting. This is so important. Take the time every time to add the skills, to add the key words that you see. Be sure to incorporate that. It sounds like a lot of work, but think of it this way. If you send out 10 strong, tailored resumes and cover letters every day versus 50 applications of the same resume, you will see better results with those 10 tailored resumes. So it sounds like a lot of work every time, but you're going to see the benefits. It's going to make up for itself very quickly. So tailor it every time, send a cover letter, and again, make sure that you're keeping in mind the individual needs of each job posting. Another best practice is to use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an amazing platform, not just to apply for jobs. A lot of companies use LinkedIn as one of their primary avenues for posting job postings and searching for applicants. So use it for that, apply to jobs on LinkedIn, but also use it as a way to connect with professionals at your desired employer. Build up your network. Engage with these people, engage with recruiters, follow these companies on LinkedIn. Show that you're interested in what they do and their mission. And something that you can do as well is message some of those professionals who are currently working at your desired employer and ask them if they have any advice on how to get your foot in the door, or ask them if there's anything that they feel you should know moving forward in applying for this role. You might not always get a response, but if you do, it'll be incredibly helpful. And either way, you're building your network and you're demonstrating to the company that you are invested in the company, in their employees, and in their mission. So a lot of benefits there. Use LinkedIn. It is a great tool. And then finally, be mindful of the inundation of applicants that talent acquisition specialists receive on a day-to-day basis. Recruiters are seeing hundreds and thousands of resumes, right? So understanding that if they don't follow up with you, it does not reflect anything about your skills. It does not reflect or diminish any of your accomplishments. And the same goes for rejections. Part of the job search is receiving some rejections, and it's important to know that even though these things happen, to keep on persevering, to keep on going, and understanding that, again, this is not a reflection of your strengths or skills, and this does not diminish your accomplishments. So feel free to follow up with recruiters as well. It could just be that they completely forgot, right? Maybe they have tons and tons of resumes that they're seeing and it slipped their mind. So don't be afraid to follow up, but also understand that, again, it is nothing personal against you. If you are not considered or selected for a role, keep on moving and keep on going. All right, and then some additional tips here is making sure that you're staying active during downtime. Sometimes the job search can be a long process and there is downtime involved. So making sure that you're using that time wisely by doing your research into the industries that you're pursuing, the companies you'd like to work for. If you don't have direct experience with maybe their software certifications and knowledges, make up for that. Think about what they value. Think about how you can develop the skills that they are looking for and start working on that. There are a lot of great online certification programs, online trainings, a lot of free resources. So you can use that time again to build that up and again, bolster your candidacy. Another tip for new graduates. It's important to understand that companies know that new graduates likely do not have the exact fit and skills for a job. And soft skills become more important, right? Again, with these entry-level candidates, it's okay if you don't have these direct experiences. Focus on what you've done in your past that can apply. And again, these companies will know that, they'll understand that, and they will help develop those skills. So throughout your career, you can apply those more and more. Another best practice, again, more research. Research any tools that are becoming more popular and becoming more prevalent in your industry. See if you can find a certification. Again, things like Salesforce, Excel, QuickBooks are always things that are going to be helpful. And think about the more industry-specific skills and follow those, pursue those, and work on self-development. Not only does this help your candidacy, but it also shows a hiring professional that you are dedicated to improving and growing your own skills, which is a great asset. And it's something that they will likely want in their employees. All right, and we have a question here. Best way to follow up without aggravating an HR professional. Another great question here. I would say, keep it professional. Don't inundate them in messages. If you haven't heard anything, let's say for a week and a half or so, 2 weeks, and it depends on the timelines that they told you, so keep their timelines in mind. But just send them an email, tell them that you'd like to follow up on this posting and say that you're very interested in the role and you just want to declare your continuing interest and kind of frame it in that way so that you're reminding them, like, hello, I'm still here, I'm still interested, and giving them that nudge, right? And it's also going to look good that you are following up, and it shows, again, that you're invested in this company. So play it by ear, kind of be flexible about the timeline depending on what they said, but then just feel free to follow up with an email and tell them that you're still interested and that you're here to answer any other questions that they have, if they have any other ones. And then a question about cover letters. How detailed should cover letters be? Specific to each essential qualification with examples or briefs? Another great question. The cover letter does not need to be specific to every qualification that they list. Instead, think about some of your biggest accomplishments throughout your time, whether it be academic or professional. Think about the skills that are most relevant to that role and show that you have developed those skills in the past and show how you've been able to apply those skills in a way that relates to what they are looking for from the position. Also important to note, cover letters should not be excessively long. You want to keep the word count on cover letters fairly short as well. One page should cover it. And again, visual efficiency is key, making sure that you're not including too much information in the cover letter. The cover letter should just be a primer, right? And then the resume should go into detail about how your qualifications align with their requirements. All right. Well, that is all that we have for you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me as we went over these best practices, these tips, and we'll now take some time to go over any questions that you have. So I will go ahead, keep an eye on that live chat box and answer those, and feel free to send in any additional questions, or if you have any questions about who we are, what our services offer, and what's involved with that. And I also would like to say we do have a free resume review online. If you go to our website, you can actually submit your existing resume, and one of our writers, our certified professional resume writers, will evaluate that on a scorecard based on what is recommended for the resume. So if that's something that you're interested in, feel free to check out that resource again to get that personalized advice from one of our writers. All right, and then a great question from Jen, cover letters. And some online postings only ask for the resume. Should you add the cover letter in the file as page 1 of the resume? That's a great question as well. If they're only asking for the resume in the upload file, let's say stick with uploading the resume. We want to avoid, again, any chance of any of the valuable keywords that you put in that resume being negated or diminished because the resume would be on the second page, right? So by adding the cover letter at the top, we're kind of decreasing the value of the words on the second page. So upload the resume as is. A lot of the times there might be an email address for contacting the hiring professional for each posting. If that is available, you can send them that cover letter or see if the resume upload allows you to upload 2 separate files. Sometimes it will. And if so, after you upload the resume, just upload your cover letter in the same section. Any other questions that any of you have? I'll stay for just a couple minutes more to make sure that we can cover everything, but feel free to post them here. And then also, if we don't get to everything today, again, feel free to reach out to us at our website and we'll be sure to point you in the right direction. A great question from Anne-Marie. After an interview, you should write a thank you email, correct? Any advice on the best way to word that? A great question. Yes, you should be writing a thank you email after your interviews. Try to send them either day of or the next day. Try to avoid sending them or waiting any longer than that. We want to make sure that you're making that impression and sending that when you're still fresh in their minds. And basically with that, just thank them for their time. Again, reinforce your interest in the company. Maybe call out a few of your own skills and how they align with the company's mission. And again, keep it simple and let them know that you are there for questions if they have any additional questions throughout the process. So thank them for their time and keep it straightforward. Any additional questions? A great question from Finn. When connecting and messaging with employees at a company, should you look for recruiters to connect with or those higher up or all of them? A great question. So something that's a great start is, yes, looking for those recruiters, looking for the HR professionals at that company, connect with them, but also feel free to connect with people that are in similar roles or on similar teams than the roles and teams that you are looking to apply for. So go through that, see the areas and see the professionals that have career paths or maybe have had the role that you're gunning for. And that way you can connect with them and message them, ask about their experience and ask if they have any advice. And typically we see, again, they might not always reply But we've seen great results from just connecting, sending those messages, getting in touch. And a lot of the time, these people will want to help you, right? And they'll want to give you advice on the best way to kind of enter the company and go about the application process. So with those higher ups, I would recommend, connecting with them as well. Maybe the executive team. Likely those people are going to have more of a public persona or public brand. But when it comes to messaging people about the roles and how to best enter the company, focus on the ones that are knowledgeable in the area that you're applying to and in the role that you're applying to, as well as HR professionals. Another great question: should the About section on LinkedIn match the summary of my resume? Yes, that's a great question. And we do recommend keeping that the same. And so a reason with LinkedIn and with the resumes, we want to make sure that we are keeping all of that content as similar as possible. And the reason for that, when you are uploading your About section, creating your summary, making sure that you're keeping it all very similar to avoid any red flags being raised by recruiters. So if a recruiter looks at your LinkedIn and sees something so different from your resume, that's going to be a red flag. It could potentially hurt your candidacy. So keep that information as aligned as possible. Thank you so much. I seriously appreciate you taking the time to come and go through this today. So thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you so much for asking such amazing questions. And again, feel free to reach out to us if there's any other questions that come up. We're here to help. And again, we can either answer your questions or point you in the right direction to the right resources if necessary. Any other questions? All right, thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here, but thank you again for joining me today, and best of luck moving forward. Again, if there are any other questions, feel free to contact us at our website. But outside of that, I hope everybody has an excellent rest of their days and good luck moving forward on the job search.